Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. Quite honestly, most of today's episode is probably going to sound like a case cracked. It kind of sounds like this is supposed to be a happy story, but now there's some new developments, some new questions that are being raised that are shaking all of that up. Let me tell you guys, last week I was recording an episode of Seriously Mysterious. I was doing the secret podcast recording here on the channel. If you want to check that out, be sure to have your notifications turned on. I don't announce them in advance. Sometimes I'll give my patrons a little heads up, but essentially it's a live stream that happens spontaneously. It disappears as soon as it's done. You can help me record an episode of Seriously Mysterious. But we were recording one last week, and someone in the comments or in the chat was trying to call my attention to a missing persons case. And they mentioned it was a missing mother. I thought they were trying to say it was their mother that was missing. That wasn't the case. But it's a woman that went missing in Zion National Park. And I started tracking it at that point. I got to be honest with you guys. Those stories for me are some of the hardest. Pretty rare that we have a good outcome on stories like that. They're also tough to cover. There's not a lot of detail in terms of the disappearance or the elements around the disappearance, unless you have a lot of backstory in terms of who they are, what was going on in their life leading up to the disappearance. But so many of these kind of national park disappearances, the story is someone goes to the park and they're not seen after that. There's just not a whole lot, but I wanted to track it. We have seen some good outcomes, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in today's episode as well. So in this instance, thankfully, a few days later, it seems like we had a good outcome. So at this point, we've got several articles telling the story of how a woman survived for 12 days in Utah's Zion National Park, but those stories really aren't telling you how she survived. And now someone that worked on the search efforts is saying those stories that we're hearing don't actually make sense. I'm wondering right off the bat, are there real problems in this story, or is the problem that we're hearing everything second and third hand? I figured the best thing to do would be to go through this story together with you guys so we could have a good, meaningful discussion about this in the comments below. So let's start with learning where this takes place. Zion National Park is an American national park located in southwestern Utah near the town of Springdale. A prominent feature of the 229 square mile park is Zion Canyon, which is 15 miles long and up to 2,640 feet deep. The canyon walls are reddish and tan-colored Navajo sandstone, eroded by the North Fork of the Virgin River. It's so deep that if you actually look at this area through satellite photo, which we will later, the shadows are so hard from the canyon walls, you can't actually make out all the details of the canyon floor. But it's also amazingly beautiful from what I can see. All these photos are showing how beautiful it is. I've only been to Utah for a few very brief periods. I know I did go to a national park there, but I was literally stopping through on the way. I'm not sure if it was this one, but Utah, extremely scenic. I mean, really, the mountains and the landscape out there are extremely unique and really pretty. We get another shot of it here at the entrance for Zion National Park. So now that we know where this is taking place, here is the missing person poster for Holly Suzanne Courtier. And we can see that this was put out by Zion National Park. They're saying she is 38 years old, stands at 5'3", weighs 100 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes. But here we've also got some important details, and some of these details might come into the conversation when we're starting to talk about the feasibility of the story that we're hearing, and especially now that we have someone kind of calling it into question. So let's pay particular attention to possibly wearing. We've got a gray trucker hat, a Patagonia black nano puff jacket, a dark tank top, Danner Trail gray hiking boots, and an Osprey blue multi-day pack. And I just wanted to spend another moment on that in particular, taking a look at the pack, because it looks like you could probably fit a significant amount of materials there, especially if you were an experienced hiker. I think you could theoretically have numerous days worth of food, possibly water, maybe even other things to help take care of yourself if you're going to be out in an area for a prolonged period of time. But then there's also this other section at the bottom, items possibly with her. And here we have an open front hoodie, a Nanoloft puffy blanket, which I don't know if it's this actual one, but if it was this actual one, what a great item to try to use if you were lost somewhere. And if you were thinking that they might be doing flyovers in either a helicopter or even with drone coverage, having something this kind of unnaturally colored should really stand out. And also a camouflage double size hammock. So for that, it kind of works against it, right? You wouldn't really want a camouflage hammock out there if you were trying to be found in particular. So down in the notes, it says on October 6th, 2020 at approximately 1:30 p.m., Courtier was possibly dropped off by a private shuttle bus at the Grotto parking area within Zion National Park. Courtier's intended travel plan is unknown, and her current whereabouts are unknown. So let's continue with the story here at moms.com with an article, one of the actually more well put together articles. It was kind of put out originally when she was missing. It's since been updated, but we're going to focus back on the time when she was actually missing. Time is of the essence in the search for a missing woman in Southwest Utah. A daughter is calling for any and all help from seasoned hikers to try to locate her mother, who hasn't been seen or heard from in 12 days. Let me just stop and say, I speak to enough family members to know the torture of not knowing where your loved one is. 12 days is a long time. And for some of them, it's a drop in the bucket. But even 1 or 2 days can be excruciating. Once you get past a week, your brain just slips into a different gear in terms of what you're considering. 12 days, very long time for her daughter to be dealing with this. The story is garnering national spotlight as the race to support the search gets more complex. Mother and daughter team, Holly Courtier and Kaylee Chambers, had embarked on a gorgeous trip through Zion National Park over a month ago for Chambers' 19th birthday. The area they'd explored is known as the Narrows, and the experience left a lasting impression on 38-year-old Courtier. Courtier returned early in October. The last report of Courtier in anyone's sights was when she disembarked a shuttle van near the Grotto area on October 6th. Although temperatures have not dropped below the 50s, very good to know when we're talking about a case like this in terms of survival out there. It is unlike Courtier to be unresponsive to her daughter's outreach. The two have historically talked almost daily. Chambers noted, "We just don't know how much food she brought, how much it will last." Chambers recalls that the time spent in Zion together with Courtier made a tremendous impact. Her mother had remarked, "I've never been this close to God." Zion National Park Public Information Officer Amanda Rowland echoed that the danger and beauty go hand in hand. There is a vastness. Zion has massive sandstone cliffs. There are slot canyons and a lot of wilderness. It's definitely a lot of area to cover. It's not just flat ground. And of course, when you hear the word cliffs, that throws concerns in a whole different direction. Very scary possibilities for someone going missing in that area in particular. With over 230 square miles of maze-like canyons, Zion hosts a topographical difference of 5,000 feet from its highest to lowest points. So once again, throwing cliffs into the mix there, you've certainly got enough elevation for a very traumatic event to happen. Courtier was last seen wearing a gray trucker hat, a black Patagonia puff jacket, a tank top, hiking boots, and a blue hiking pack. Over at theindependent.co.uk, Ms. Courtier, who recently lost her nanny job due to the coronavirus pandemic, was seen getting off a shuttle van near the Grotto area, which leads to several of the park's hiking trails. However, she did not get back for her return journey, which was scheduled for later that day. So let me just talk to you guys for a moment about one of the things that is kind of running through my mind as we're now laying out the details. And of course, I've already been through all this research once already. When we're talking about being dropped off by a shuttle service, I don't know if when you buy that ticket, if you have to pick a return journey, if it's like literally you buy one ticket for both directions. I don't know if you can buy a one-way ticket and just say, hey, like take me out to the park. I don't know how long I'm going to be out there, so I'll get another ticket on the way back. From what I can see, I have looked into camping in this area. There's several official campgrounds, but they do also support backpacking. Essentially, I think just going into the wild and staying out in the wild as well. You're supposed to buy permits for any of those activities. I'm not seeing any information about her buying permits. As a matter of fact, some of the information we're going to review makes it seem like this was a completely spontaneous trip, which raises another question I'm thinking we're going to get to by the end of this. But so if you're going out there, thinking that you're going to be backpacking, if you're going to be spending the night out there, why are you going to sign up the bus for a return journey on that same day? And as a matter of fact, we know that she got dropped off somewhere around 1:30. I think the last return bus was sometime right before 5 p.m. Pretty short window of time. And if we think back on that poster with everything that she took, a hammock, a blanket possibly, the big puffy jacket, despite the fact that we're hearing the weather isn't really all that cold. As a matter of fact, I looked into other weather information, and it says that really for that time of year, it's pretty normal for it to be between the 60s all the way up to the 90s. So the puffy jacket, I'm kind of wondering, is that something that she's going to use possibly to help her get through overnights while she's staying out there? Not to mention the size of the pack. This really doesn't seem like she was going out there walking for an afternoon and was going to get back to that bus at the end of that day. So why is there an expectation set there? Like I said, it might be that that's how the tickets work. I don't know enough about this bus service. Maybe she had to do it that way. And maybe she was figuring, well, I'm going to stay a couple days, and when I come back out, I'm just going to tell them, oh yeah, I missed the bus. I got caught up in there, and get a ride back. I don't know. Just one of several different things we're going to look into with today's episode. Park officials then launched a rescue operation after Kaylee reported her mother missing. With assistance from multiple agencies, the team used drones, and I'm hearing actually multiple canine units. And for agencies, we had the park rangers, we had local law enforcement as well, kind of collaborating on search efforts. Jumping over to outdoorhub.com, who wrote about this. She absolutely loves hiking, and it's one of her favorite things to do. And when she needs clarity and to spend some time with herself, nature is her happy place, her daughter said. So important to know, we're talking about someone that is an experienced hiker. Her daughter's literally saying this is one of her favorite things to do. As a matter of fact, we know that her and her daughter were there just a few months before this. They had a great time together. I've seen some photos from that as well. So she's even familiar with this area in particular. So what's going wrong in this particular instance? I'm not sure, but her daughter continues, this was her dream to see national parks. She lost her job as a nanny due to COVID-19. The family could not afford to keep paying her. She made that a positive thing, said that gave her the time to get out and see the parks. Continuing at MSN.com, 2 days after she failed to return to the shuttle, after heading out on the Kayenta Trail toward the Emerald Pools, her vehicle was discovered in the nearby town of Springdale at the park's southwest entrance early in the search, Zion officials had said. What I want to point out there is the order of events that they're describing there is saying that was early on in the search. So they already knew that she was missing in that particular area. They found her vehicle in local Springdale, which makes sense. We know that she took a bus to that particular trail area. Kaylee Chambers told CBS Los Angeles last week that her mom had been traveling the country in a converted van after losing her job due to the coronavirus pandemic. I know she would not give up on me, so I refused to give up on her, her daughter told the TV station. And of course, either way you look at this, and it's strange to kind of have to hit the point like this, but look, family's concerned that she's missing. Thankfully, one way or another, she's found. And from my point of view, regardless of whatever's happening in this story, regardless of whatever happened in that 12-day period out there, thankfully, one way or another, she's found. I've said it on the channel before. I'll always keep pushing this. Missing persons cases are not just about the person that's missing. It's about the hole that they leave and everyone that's affected by that. So just let me be clear. Either way with this case, I'm thankful that her family didn't have to keep worrying. So we have her found safe after a 2-week search in Utah's Zion National Park. She's found over the weekend, this past weekend on Sunday, I believe that was October 18th. Authorities said Courtier was located following a credible tip from a park visitor, and she was reunited with her family. It's unclear exactly where she was during the 12 days she was missing. Courtier's daughter, Kaylee Chambers, said not long after her mom disappeared that she is an experienced hiker, had hiked before, and was familiar with Zion National Park. She said she and her mother visited the park together just a few weeks before she became lost. Interesting, because I've seen a couple cases like this. I can't think of a time where I've ever heard about a case being solved by a tip being called in like this. Sometimes when they find remains, I guess that could be kind of be called a tip that's called in. But usually it'll be someone that's hiking or someone that's hunting in the area. They come across the remains, they call it in. But for someone that's still alive, it puts a weird image in my head about, wait, did someone see her out there, and did they see that she needed help, but they didn't actually try to help her directly? They went and called for help or something. We're going to get some more detail on that, but just kind of strange for a tip to be what breaks this for me. Here it's pointed out again at nps.gov, park rangers received a credible tip from a park visitor that they say had seen Courtier within the park. And this is actually from the National Park Service. So some of the other information we're going to see is a little bit different than this. This is saying that the visitor actually saw her. So once again, it's raising that question with me about, did someone, if she's been out there for 12 days, she probably at least looked pretty rough. And you're not going to try to engage and help her directly. You're going to kind of, oh yeah, I saw someone over there, and call it into the park rangers. I don't know. There are really not a lot of details about the person that called in the tip. And honestly, another aspect of this case, we really don't have any direct quotes from Holly about what's going on around this. Law enforcement officers found her in a thickly vegetated area along the Virgin River. She was able to leave of her own capability with minimal assistance. So there we're hearing, despite the fact that she'd been out there for 12 days, she was able to leave pretty much on her own. Minimal assistance, I would think, maybe they're kind of helping her up a few areas or something like that, but we're not talking a situation where she's airlifted out. Over at erienewsnow.com, we get some more information from the family about what happened out there, because obviously, I think the media ran with this story in terms of woman missing in national park. That's going to grab a bunch of attention. Then, of course, woman found alive after missing for 12 days in national park. That's going to grab even more attention. But really, no one's diving in for details here. Like I said, we don't have any direct interviews with her going on. Really, the information's filtering through her family. So that's why, like I said at the start of this video, I don't know if this information is, because it's coming through someone else, we're talking second or in some case third-hand information. How accurate is it? Are there some things that are being misstated that are starting to look kind of weird? Maybe. But let's hear from her daughter. She injured her head on a tree, Kaylee Chambers said in a text exchange. She was very disoriented as a result, and thankfully ended up near a water source, a riverbed. She thought her best chance of survival was to stay next to a water source. I think there's a couple obvious things about that. Sure, absolutely. In terms of, you're going to need water. Water is one of the things most critically that you're going to need if you're in a situation where you're running on limited resources. I think the saying is you can go about 3 days without water. You can go about 30 days without food. And she's out there for 12. So definitely had to get to a water source. But also in terms of search efforts, I would think that search efforts are probably going to gravitate towards water sources as well, maybe thinking along those same lines. It was not clear from the text exchange if the water source was potable. Interesting point we're going to get back to. But Chambers said Courtier was without food while she was lost in the park. Kind of a question mark just because of the items that we talked about her packing in with. If you are going to at least be sleeping out there, shouldn't you have some level of food with you? I would think that she had something. I don't know if it was enough for 12 days, but I would think she took something if she was really planning on setting up a hammock and spending the night out there. Unless there's another condition, and we're going to touch on that by the end of the episode as well. I'm just going to leave it there. Quote, "She was too weak and disoriented to seek help," her daughter said. "She was unable to take more than a step or two without collapsing. This prevented her from being able to seek out help. She told me she was so dehydrated she couldn't open her mouth." Authorities found Courtier in a thickly vegetated area along the Virgin River. Park spokeswoman Amanda Rowland said in a statement, "The malnourished and dehydrated 38-year-old was spending the night in a hospital near Zion," family friend Kelly Kaufman White said hours after Courtier was found Sunday. So, and I don't think anyone can deny that. I'm pretty sure she did wind up in a hospital for the night. One thing that's kind of a point of discussion around this is it sounds like her family kind of came when she was found and they took her to the hospital. I don't know if there was an ambulance ride to the hospital, but we know that at least from the spot where she was found to getting her kind of back out of there, it doesn't seem like there was any emergency transport service used for the initial movement of her. I'd be pretty surprised. I would think probably when they got back to the parking lot, there might have been an ambulance trip from there back to the hospital. I mean, just in terms of being basically safe and making sure that her vitals were met. And then it looks like there's at least one night at the hospital after that. But honestly, we're not getting a ton of detail about the hospital stuff either. We do have some more information coming from a sister that we'll touch on later. But in terms of hospital stay, can't really answer that, unfortunately. Over at thestreetjournal.org, the sister of a hiker who has been rescued in Zion after spending 12 days alone with no food and limited water says she is now recovering in the hospital on an IV and that she has bruises. Now, there's a few different references that I'm seeing to these bruises, and I'm not seeing any explanation for the bruises at all. We have her found at the bottom of the canyon. We have her found close to the river. The story is she hit her head and it seems like didn't go anywhere. It seems like she pretty much stayed in one location. And we've got another little piece of evidence, I guess you would call it, that might actually point to the fact that she stayed in that one location the whole time. There doesn't seem to have been any significant fall. We know that she was able to leave pretty much of her own accord when she was found. They didn't talk about having to strap her to a board to carry her out, nothing along those lines. So I don't know where these bruises would necessarily come from. We don't know about whatever. I mean, she hit her head on a tree. I don't know. I just haven't seen any explanation for the bruises. Holly's family set up a GoFundMe campaign with the goal of raising $15,000. They've so far raised more than $10,000. I think it's actually $12,000 at this point. Holly has survived on no food at all and very little water, her family said. They said they needed the money to pay for the search and for any medical expenses she'd incur after she was found because she has no health insurance. And let me just say, I think there's a bunch of caring, good people that contributed to that GoFundMe. I think there's probably some people wondering, is that possibly a motivating factor in this whole thing, the GoFundMe, or trying to raise money? We know that she's out of work at this time. I got to tell you guys, for me personally, even if that is, I'd rather be wrong. I'd rather be wrong about it. I'd rather donate to something like this and be completely taken for a fool than to even be correct on the other side of that. I just, I've given to so many. I trust the good of people. I don't think that people generally want to do other people wrong. Every now and then I'll get a little twinge, some kind of weird feeling about certain ones, and I'll say, you know what, I'm going to stay away from that one. This one just isn't quite hitting me right. But more often than not, I would rather just make the donation and try to help. And if you're being taken for, well, that's fine. I'd rather be the person that's taken for once and helps 9 people than the person that's afraid to be taken for and winds up only helping 3. But that's just me personally. Over at the New York Times, another quote from her daughter: she was without food the entire time in Zion. So this, and we have to keep this in mind too. The story we're hearing is from her daughter, from two of her sisters. We're not hearing it directly from her. We don't know if she might be being dishonest with them, and maybe they're just relaying literally what they've been told. They don't have any reason to try to prove her right or prove her wrong in this. Could she have gone without food for that time? Yeah. I mean, I talked about the rule already. She could have gone without food, couldn't have gone without water for 12 days. Just wouldn't be feasible. So the water thing, but we've got her by the river, right? I'm going to hold off on that. Once again, she tells the New York Times kind of the same information about that she couldn't take a step. She couldn't open her mouth. The not being able to open your mouth thing, kind of hits me a little weird too. Like, is that being used as an excuse for why you couldn't call out for help? Because quite honestly, even if you couldn't take more than a few steps, I would think, couldn't you grab a couple rocks and smack those together, or grab a stick and bang it against a tree? I mean, something to make some kind of noise that was obvious that you were out there, and not have to yell or not have to scream. It's just something. It's a little strange to me that she's so dehydrated she couldn't open her mouth. Like, that's the outcome from the dehydration. The only reason why I could think that that's such an important outcome, to the point that her daughter is literally repeating this time and time again to all these different publications, is because I think her daughter believes that that's why her mother couldn't have called out for help. Ms. Chambers said she visited her mother on Monday while she was getting medical care. She's getting her strength back and hydrating. She said she's still weak but recovering. She's been getting fluids because she was extremely dehydrated, and we are slowly introducing foods. Her health remains our top priority. And let me just once again put out there, regardless of whatever side of the conversation you wind up on this topic with, I think that's absolutely true. If you think that this is a real occurrence or not, one way or another, there seems to be a health component to this. We're talking about it kind of in the context of physical health here, but I believe there's a very strong possibility that there's a mental health discussion that goes with this as well, that the press is not being made privy to, that none of us are being made privy to, and quite honestly, could be a very strong and compelling reason for the discrepancies that are being noted, and all of that as well. More than 4 million people visit the park each year, according to the National Park Service, which said on its website that in the past year, teams had searched for missing people in about 24 national parks. People usually go missing because they become disoriented, lost, injured, or their disappearance is voluntary or the result of a crime, the service said. And that last one, the one before the last, their disappearance is voluntary. That is the one that I think has grabbed, in terms of the possibilities, has grabbed the attention of Sergeant Daryl Cashin, which, let me bring up a quick image of him from this video. Here we go. That is Sergeant Daryl Cashin. He says his search and rescue team was asked to assist in locating Holly Courtier, and this is over at fox40.com. Cashin says Courtier was found within approximately half a mile from where she was last seen in the grotto parking area. Half a mile. Using kind of the standard 3 miles per hour walking pace, that's a 10-minute walk. Even if you slow that down to half, let's say the conditions are rough or you're really having trouble walking and you're kind of stumbling along the way, that's like 20 minutes away. But what concerns me more than that is if she's really that close to the parking area and where the shuttles are coming and going, couldn't she hear those shuttles? Couldn't she hear the vehicles that were driving in there? Wouldn't that at least give you a direction to go stumbling, walking, crawling, whatever you need to do to help? Or was she so incapacitated by this head wound that that wasn't a possibility? I don't know. I did want to point out one other discrepancy. Interestingly, at a different Fox News article, these are written by separate people. One's a local affiliate, which I quite honestly think has better information. And I think this is the national level, foxnews.com. Here they're saying that Cashin had noted she was recovered within roughly half a mile from where authorities said she was spotted, according to the report. So basically they're saying that from what the tipster called in, they found her within half a mile of what the tipster said. But There are no other direct quotes in this article at all. And I have a feeling that this local one, first of all, they interviewed him. You can actually watch the video for yourself here. I have a feeling the information from this article is a bit stronger. That's just my opinion on it. Cashin says the National Park search and rescue teams went above and beyond. Understand, there's a lot of country up there. If you go off trail, it will be virtually impossible to find somebody unless they want to be found, Cashin says. And I think you can kind of infer from that he's once again touching on that point from the last website, that maybe she was out there and actually didn't want to be found. With his 25 years of experience on search and rescue teams, from swift water rescues to diving, Cashin says he knows the Virgin River is not a clean water source with many species of parasites. And then it goes to talk about the fact that they had done some testing on that same river further north, and that they had found that it was so bad, park officials recommended that visitors avoid all contact with the river until further notice. We're not talking about just don't drink the water. Avoid all contact. Don't even use it. Don't touch it. Don't put your hands in it. Sounds pretty serious to me. Here's another quote from Cashin. If she had been drinking that water, unless she had some really high immune system, she would have been very, very ill and probably unable to come out on her own, Cashin says. She either took a lot of water with her or had another clean water source that was near here, but the Virgin River is not that source. Cashin says it's a high possibility Courtier would have died if she was drinking the water for 12 days. Without any water, she would have died within 2 to 3 days, he says. The family said Courtier had hit her head and was only able to take a few steps before collapsing. He says, quote, if we had found somebody in that condition with that kind of severe head injury, we would have at minimum called for a transport agency to check her out. The fact that that didn't happen tells me they did not find any significant injury to her that would have prompted them to do that. Physically, she seemed to be in a condition that did not warrant an ambulance, and they felt was comfortable to release her to her family to address, Cashin added. So quite honestly, what I was talking about earlier about getting her out to the parking lot and then taking an ambulance from there, he's alluding to the fact that that didn't even happen. It seems like her family literally took her likely to some local emergency room or urgency center right after this. Cashin says that from his knowledge of the case, there was some question of her decision-making regarding her trip to the park. He says that she left California in the middle of the night and did not tell her family where she was going. Woodland Hills, I don't think I really hit that earlier in the video, but Woodland Hills is in California. He's saying, and this is another tough thing because once again, now we're talking about second or third hand information, but he's basically saying she didn't tell anyone where she was going. She left in the middle of the night. I've seen several other sources that are kind of quoting the same thing, that she didn't really tell anyone that she was going to this park. It raises a big question for me, but I don't want to drop it on you guys quite yet. Let's keep pushing through this. I know I keep hooking and telling you guys that we're going to get to things later, but I'm really trying to keep this conversation straight in my mind, and it's tough. This is a very difficult case to understand when you've got such conflicting opinions. If she's by the Virgin River, she's down in the valley, not in the back country up in the plateaus and the peaks, Cashin said. She's in that main part of the canyon, which always has thousands of people walking up and down those trails. I'm sure people walked by yelling for her. Now, is that part of the reason why her daughter keeps pushing this story about the fact that she couldn't even open her mouth? Because maybe they've heard from people already, oh, wow, we were right by there. Everyone was going by and they were calling out for her and no one heard anything in response. I don't know. Possibly. The statements that the family is giving and the statements that the park is giving don't add up, Cashin says. Those are the types of questions I think everybody has. I think the place where that question can be answered is with her. So here's that satellite view I told you guys about earlier, and you can see like the shadows are so hard, they're completely wiping out sections of the ground. You can see the Virgin River that continues through here because they've drawn the line of it, but the shadow has completely obliterated the area. The Virgin River we can see here, and we've got this area called, I don't know if this is a road or just a walking trail. Oh, this is actually, it looks like a road. Yeah, Floor of the Valley Road. And there's kind of trails that go next to it here. But the Virgin River, at least at this point, not very far from the main road and the walking trail. The parking area they're talking about, I haven't been able to get an exact hit on. I found this area called the Grotto Picnic Area. I would assume that's close to the parking area. If you zoom in really, really strongly on these dark areas, right up here is a parking lot. And right here is the Angel's Landing trailhead. Several of the trailheads are right here. So the description seems to be matching what we heard for the Grotto parking area being right here. So if he's talking half a mile from there, assuming that that's the correct quote, which I know I'm throwing a bunch of different caveats on this. But if we're talking half a mile from there, we've got somewhere in kind of this area where she's found. And this Virgin River through this area, even for up to a mile, it runs very, very close to this road the whole time. It really seems like, not with a ton of effort, even if you don't want to go the half mile back to the parking area, you could do a much shorter walk and get out to the road. There's even some services around here. There's a lodge here. There's a grill here. I don't know, guys. I don't see this river really diverging from that road too strongly within a mile of that location. Over down here, it kind of starts splitting off a little bit, but I mean, even at this location here, I mean, you're talking a couple 100 feet from the river to the road. I would guess back here, you get a little bit of a bigger section, but even at that section, even if you were kind of at this furthest peak, you're talking maybe 1,000 feet to the road. I don't know. It's tough because we don't have a great location on where this actually is taking place. But we do, of course, have the information come out from Cashin, and then some new information comes out from the family, and we start getting a little bit more detail in terms of what's going on around this. Is it going to help us understand any of this better? Let's continue at CBS58.com. The 38-year-old woman was severely dehydrated and had lost 15 pounds when she was found earlier this week, her older sister told CNN. 15 pounds, a pretty serious amount of weight, particularly if you only weigh 100 pounds, which is what I think the poster had said. That's, kind of dangerous weight loss. The doctor was shocked she was so dehydrated. Her potassium levels were extremely low, Jamie Strong, Courtier's sister, told CNN. Her levels of her kidney function were very bad. She was starting to show signs of her kidneys shutting down. Once she hit her head, she did not have the energy to walk out, Strong said. She was praying to be found, and we were all praying to find her. Courtier had a Sharpie with her, her sister says, and would mark how many days had passed on a tree nearby. There's actually a picture of that tree, and we can see we've got 12 days marked on it. I gotta say, she's got pretty decent penmanship. I'm not trying to be snarky. I'm just thinking of someone that can't even walk more than a few steps, coming over to this tree and kind of keeping this in such good line. As a matter of fact, just to be perfectly honest with you guys, when I first saw this image, I was like, did someone mark all that at once? Like, the first thing I was thinking was, what are they using to mark that? Because it's kind of strange to me that it's so strong. And then I thought, well, maybe they're using soot from a fire. I mean, that would be kind of simple, and maybe you can get it kind of dark enough like that. I didn't bump into this detail about the fact that she had a Sharpie until I started really diving into all this. But it still struck me that, well, if you're kind of marking these on different days, shouldn't you see some aging that's going on, like with the older ones? Looking at this, it kind of looks like the oldest ones are actually maybe the more stronger hash marks. Maybe the pen was running out as time was going on, because this one looks fairly weak. I don't know. I'm not saying that this is a picture that can crack the case, but for me, when I saw this picture, I had a strange feeling. I had kind of a something isn't right with this. And there's another aspect to that. This makes me assume that she was at this one location for 12 days, or she had kept track while she was at other locations. And when she got to this location, she added those days here as well. Kind of weird. Like, I don't know. It's a bizarre thing to think of. She goes a half mile in. We're talking literally a 10-minute walk away from where she's dropped off, hits her head and stays in the same place for 12 days. 12 days? I don't know. I've only seen this picture in one place. That's why I grabbed a screen grab of it. It was in one of the video segments, but it's a picture that really has me scratching my head wondering what's going on with this case. She had a really hard time moving because of lack of energy, lack of water, food, Strong said. But we got to remember, we're not talking about only on the 12th day. We're talking about a whole range of almost 2 weeks. She wasn't starving necessarily on the first day, or was she? We're going to get some more information. Despite being close to a river, Courtier couldn't drink the water, her sister said, because of toxicity concerns. So where we had her daughter talking about the fact that her mother was staying by the river, and if I recall correctly, I think I've seen in several areas where her daughter is actually saying she was drinking that water. Now we have new information that comes out after Cashin's information where he says there's no way she was drinking that water. And we have an older sister saying, yeah, no, she wasn't drinking that water. She couldn't drink the water. But we're not given any explanation about, okay, well then how was she staying hydrated? Because she couldn't have gone completely without hydration for 12 days. When she was found, Courtier also had a large lump on the back of her head, her sister says. After hitting against a sharp part of the tree she had tied her hammock to. So we actually get a little more detail about the head injury, but it's not anywhere near what I was even thinking. Like, you know, a fall of some kind. If she was standing up and she fell back and she hit her head on something, could be very traumatic. We've seen cases where, we did that whole episode on one punch hits where people can die from just a fall like that. But here we're hearing that she had hit her head on a sharp part of the tree that she had tied her hammock to. How much force could that have been? I don't know. It's kind of strange, and it's not enough detail to really analyze. I don't know if they're talking about that she was laying in the hammock and she's swinging around in the hammock and she hit her head. I would assume they're talking about when she was actually in the act of tying it and maybe had a fall and fell against it and hit her head, or maybe stood up and there was a section of the tree that kind of jagged out and she stood up and the force of her standing actually knocked her head into it. We don't have enough detail, but these types of injuries just have me wondering. To put you out of commission where you can't walk for 12 days, I would expect a very traumatic head injury, and I know Cashin is kind of that same mind. Rangers told us her hammock was seen by a little boy and his mom, Strong said. They spotted the hammock, so that was the call that was made to the Rangers. Well, the National Park Service doesn't say that. National Park Service is saying they actually saw her. And from what we understand from the missing poster, the hammock was probably the last thing that you would see. It was camouflage. So I don't know. And even if this is true, even if they did spot the hammock, we're under the belief that she can't take more than a step or two. They didn't see her anywhere around the hammock. You see a hammock hanging out there, it bothers you enough that you think you got to call it in, but you don't notice if a person's around there, or do you see other items? We know she had several other items that probably are easier to spot than that hammock, including the bright blue backpack, at least. And outside of that, maybe that multicolored blanket. I don't know, guys. So her sister Jamie also did an interview, and the reporter raises an interesting question, and then we hear another very interesting consideration in all this.
It sounds like she wanted to be off the grid.
She did. Initially, she wanted to be off the grid. She did not want to be off the grid for 12 days.
To make matters worse, she started fasting a couple of days before the trip and intended to keep fasting.
And so she became extremely weak very early on.
So one of the concerns I had before about, we're not talking about her starving from the moment that she shows up there. Now we're hearing a story from her sister where, well, actually she did begin fasting a few days before this. We know that she drove from California to Utah, supposedly in the middle of the night. That's a pretty considerable drive. I'm still bothered by the thought that she gets out there, she walks half a mile, she hits her head, and she's stuck for 12 days. I'm having trouble with that. So the GoFundMe at this point has actually been closed. There's no further donations can be made to it. I don't know why. I don't know if there's some type of blowback that's happening around this. I know originally they were trying to raise 15,000. They got to 12 and now it has stopped. Maybe the medical concerns have been addressed. They're talking about in this GoFundMe, they're also going to, try to recoup the expenses for family that traveled out there. Her daughter left and went right out there as soon as all of this happened. The supplies that they bought, flyers, hiking equipment, binoculars. There's a lot of very real expenses here that are associated with this. There's a lot of resources that were pulled to try to help this search effort as well. I don't know why the GoFundMe is closed at this point. I have a feeling it might be because of them being concerned about some public blowback with what's going on around this case. Now that you have someone that was actively working part of this case that's saying, hey, you know what, this is kind of strange. This isn't looking quite right to us. Ultimately, I'm left with a lot of things I don't understand. We have an experienced hiker that doesn't take some type of emergency kit with them or a cell phone. I saw a comment from someone who said, I'm an experienced hiker, and even when I go on a local day hike, I take enough food and water for 2 days in case I get stuck. I think that's a really good point. Is there a possibility that she did pack in water with her? I'm telling you, the things that we know she took make it seem like she's staying there at least a night. So I can't believe she wouldn't have taken water. And just because you're fasting doesn't mean that you stop drinking water. So possibly she could have had a purifier with her as well. I don't know if that would have worked for the state of with the state of the water that we're talking about there. She had that return trip scheduled, which bothers me because I think that would have been part of the trigger for her being noticed to be missing. But once again, she's taken a hammock, possibly a blanket. It seems like she's planning on missing that return trip in terms of what she's taking on the way out. We've got that puffy jacket, but it's usually warm and sunny during the days there. Highs between 60 and 90 degrees on average that time of year. In the pictures of her previous trip with her daughter, they show her in the water with her daughter, and she's only wearing a sweatshirt then. She doesn't have the big puffy jacket or anything like that at that time when she went there, and she's in water. You don't take any food or water despite having materials to sleep outdoors. I'm really bothered by that. Was there any fire making materials? If she is planning on sleeping outdoors, kind of like my initial assumption about maybe she was using soot to mark the tree. Could she have started a fire? Could she have used that to try to signal for help? We've got the hammock being spotted, but we don't know where she is during that. In that video segment I showed you, there's kind of a section at the end of that just mashes together the information, and I can't make sense out of it. It's like the reporters saying, they saw the hammock and then they went and they found her. Like the tipster actually went and found her. The sister then has a quote and she's saying, yep, they saw the hammock and then they called in a tip. It's not even matching what the reporter's saying. So I don't know how to make sense out of that. The 12 marks on the tree to me look like someone just took a pen, walked up there and put 12 hash marks on a tree. And I don't know how much aging to expect or something. I mean, I'm not an expert in that way. The way that those marks are lined up, I don't know. I'm having trouble with the marks on the tree. Reportedly, she's able to leave with very little help, somehow survived on water that you can't drink. But then we've got her sister saying, nope, she knew about it, so she didn't drink that water. Well, we still don't have an explanation for what water she did drink. No ambulance transport. head trauma that incapacitated her for 12 days. Then we've got this whole aspect, and I don't know how much of this is accurate or not, but reportedly she leaves home in the middle of the night, doesn't tell anyone where she's going. As a matter of fact, I've got another clip for you here with her sister.
Her sister says Holly was planning a solo trip to the park, but never told her family.
She thought, I'll just go and be with nature for a couple days.
So once again, we get some information and we don't have a lot of solid detail on it. I don't know if the sister's talking about her whole family, like she didn't tell anyone where she was going, or if her sister means her family local to her in California, which if it's her whole family, that opens up a really bizarre question, which is how did anyone know that she went missing in Utah at that particular park? The information we read about her vehicle being found was pretty clear that the vehicle was found as part of the search efforts. So the search had already started. I don't know. There's one thing I've certainly learned in all this, and that's if you go hiking and you care about your family at all, take a cell phone. Like I can't believe this could have all been so easily avoided. How do you take a Sharpie and you don't take a cell phone? Like I don't know. There's in my mind, there's another level to this. I don't think that we're talking about something that is for media attention. I don't see any benefit to her in terms of getting a big media story out of this. Money through the GoFundMe, maybe, but honestly, I don't know. I'm not feeling that's really strong either. I have a feeling, because I've looked into enough cases where I do hear that there's a mental health component, and I've seen enough trends with how the press reports on that. I have a feeling we're looking at a mental health issue that has happened in this particular case. I think the family is trying to skirt around that. We're trying to keep this story, the simple story that has been put out by the press. Woman went missing. 12 days later, she's found. She couldn't call for help. She was stuck near a river. That's how she stayed alive this whole time. I don't think it's accurate, but I think the truth of what really happened out there, I don't think we're going to get to that. Compare this to the Amanda Eller case, where we had a woman that went hiking and missing in Maui and was missing for 2 weeks, extremely similar circumstances. If you do a Google image search on Amanda Eller, here's what you see. Pictures of her at the location where she was found, where she was stuck. Pictures of her injuries, pictures of her with her rescue team. We know she gets airlifted out of that. We've got pictures of her in the hospital with her friends and family. We've got quotes from her within a day or two of her being discovered. This particular case, we've got old photos, old pictures, nothing else. No new quotes, no new information outside of what's filtering in through family. There's just several aspects to this that for me are ringing some type of mental health situation. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm not looking at that GoFundMe sideways. I have a feeling this is someone that needs help. There might be physical repercussions from this extended time in the wilderness. I have a feeling there's emotional repercussions that might be from this or even predate this. I don't think it really matters. It just seems clear to me that some level of help is needed here. And ultimately, that's kind of where I land with it. But what about you? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. As always, I ask that we remain respectful. I know it's going to be a little bit of a hot topic. Some people are going to think, no, this is an attention grab. No, this is a money grab. I'm totally up for considering your opinions. Just let's be as gentle in sharing them as possible, knowing that there is a very good chance her family, her friends might come along, might bump into this. And maybe there's considerations that they need to hear. Maybe they need to hear different perspectives on this. We want to make sure that it's not done in an inflammatory way where they're not going to be able to really consider or process that. At least that's the best of what I can hope for. Before I end today's video, I want to thank several new patrons, starting with Jeremy Morphus and Casey Monks. I also want to give a big thank you to people that have increased their pledges, including Jeremy Morphus, who signed up and then increased his pledge, Kayla Fafanoff, Katie, and Christina. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you'd like to do the same, head over to www.lordenarts.com, where you can sign up for PayPal, sign up for Patreon, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here sharing these stories with you, in some cases, desperately looking for the truth and having to realize we just might not get it. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you again on Monday here on the Lord and Arts channel.